Yeah, so I'm very happy to be joined on today's LGFA Zoom call by Tony Óg Regan, former Galway hurler of some renown and now very much an exponent of the field of sports psychology. And we wanted to get Tony on board to have a chat about the various challenges that perhaps our players are facing at this point in time with a postponement of intercounty training for the foreseeable future and some uncertainty around when we might get back on the field of play. Tony, good to have you on board. How are things are you in Galway at the moment, Tony?
Yeah, Galway. Living in Athenry at the moment, Jackie. Yeah, so just based in the office here at the moment.
The office is looking nice and bright. A fresh coat of
Just
paint, it looks like, Tony, in the background, is there?
getting too good at the DIY. I'm worried about what next year will hold. Trying to keep up to these standards.
Good to see you're looking fresh and well, Tony, as always, and as fit as a fiddle, I'm sure, as well. Tony, sports psychology is obviously a very a field you're well known for and excel in. But you don't just work with athletes and sports people. You've also a business clientele as well. Tell us a little bit about that, Tony.
Yeah, I suppose my interest around human performance extends a bit more than the sports environment, and I always felt with athletes that if you're performing well off the field, you're going to go onto the field feeling a lot more relaxed and a lot more calm and confident in yourself. So, looking at it from a holistic point of view for everyone, your health and what's the important markers for you around that, your own career, are you enjoying it? Are you doing something you love? Are you doing something you're passionate about? If you can find those areas of your life and understand what it means to you and what's meaningful to you, it's very easy to go out and express yourself on a sports field at the highest level then. And, I've been at two ends of that quadrant where maybe I worked in a career for 9 or 10 years that I enjoyed, but I wasn't hugely passionate about. And when my major passion on the field finished, as in being an intercounty hurler, I had to look at and say, am I going to spend another 4 or 5 years here working as an accountant, or is there something more for me in life that, I can bounce out of bed like a training session on a Saturday or Sunday morning training for Galway. If that was at 6 a.m., I would have been there at 5 a.m. That's how much I enjoyed it. And, I wanted to find something similar in a career. So, that kind of area really interests me. And I got into, looking at the whole side of life and executive coaching and career coaching as well. And I've worked on a number of player development programs through the Women's GPA and the Gaelic Players Association to help players understand that there is areas outside of sport that they can find as much fulfillment and achievement and satisfaction in, and it's about maybe exploring those during this time or any time during your career to get the most off the field out of yourself and get the most on the field out of yourself as well, because I feel there's a symmetry between the two of them.
Absolutely. Tony, before we bounce into maybe how our players might be coping at this time and maybe some tips that they can take on board, how has work changed for you during the pandemic, Tony? How have you managed to adjust and how have you had to adjust to this new reality that we're all living in?
Yeah, massively. I think a couple of my major clients, we just had to suspend coaching for the time being. So I probably lost 60 or 70% of my business in the last 7 or 8 weeks. And, there's a lot of worry and concern around that the first week or two. And it's about, accepting that and realizing that this has happened, you know, what can I do about it now? And, it's about trying to go online and service the needs that are out there online for both teams and individuals. It's about tapping into your support network, be it coaches, mentors, business people you've worked with before, sports organizations you worked with before, and just beginning to understand what their needs are and maybe what my skill set could help them around. So, I think we've all had to make changes and adjustments during this pandemic, be it people on the front line, be it sports people, and it's about really kind of understanding what's happening for you in your situation, how best you can deal with it, and maybe how you're not dealing with it that well.
Tony, you mentioned before we came on that you've worked with the Galway Ladies before when Stephen Glennon was in charge. We actually had Stephen on a little while ago. He was telling us about a competition to pick the best Galway Ladies Football Team of all time, which I'm sure created some hot debate in the county. Um, so obviously, from your own point of view, from being a player, you experienced many highs, you experienced some lows as well, and you managed to deal with them as best you could. When did the interest in sports psychology particularly come into play. Was it something you were aware of as a player? Were you working with a sports psychologist during your playing days? How did this come to be?
My very first kind of understanding of my mind and how it didn't help me, I think, was probably when I was 16 years old, Jackie, and I was preparing for my first All-Ireland minor final, and we were playing in 2000 before Kilkenny, I think, played maybe Offaly in the senior final. And the weeks leading up to the minor final, I had got a hamstring injury, and I'd missed maybe 3 weeks training leading into it. And I got back the week before the final, and I just remember doing the warm-up on the Sunday morning prior to that minor final, and I just was gasping for air, felt so unfit, felt like I hadn't trained all year. And I just got into such a cycle of self-criticism, self-doubt, that I barely lasted a training session. I could feel real panic and anxiety in my body and in my mind. And that kind of took over for that whole week. And I remember going up to the match just really feared in the outcome, really feared in making mistakes, really feared in costing the team the All-Ireland final. I was playing full back the same day. And I went out with a bag of nerves, and I felt so anxious playing the game, and I didn't want to touch the ball, or I didn't want the ball to come near me. And that was probably my first idea of that, if our mind isn't healthy and isn't strong and isn't connected to what we're doing, it's very hard to go out and express yourself in those pressure situations and pressure environments. So
You were projecting all of the worst case scenarios, Tony,
yeah,
before you even
yeah,
stepped out on the
yeah,
pitch.
100%. And I didn't realize that, we can manage those thoughts and we can control those thoughts and feelings by how we're looking at the whole perspective and how we're thinking and talking to ourselves. So I think that was the first time I realized that something was going on and there was issues with me around, those pressure situations. And then I started to maybe look into it more in my early 20s. I found an inconsistency in my performance on the field with Galway. Some days I'd go out and I'd be a 9 out of 10, and other days I just have no confidence and I'd be a 4 or 5 out of 10. And I couldn't understand, my training wasn't changing that much, my sleep, my eating patterns, what I was watching in the week, etc. They were all very consistent, but how I was thinking about certain opposition, how I was thinking about myself, most importantly, was affecting my confidence and affecting my preparedness for those situations. And when I started to read more books on the mind and our own sports psychology, and I started working one for the first time in 2006, it just gave me such relief that this was a trainable skill that we could all, benefit and use from. And, the more I pushed myself in the gym and the more I pushed myself on the field, I realized that they were probably percentages that I couldn't get as much gain in, but the mind was in an area that was expanding, and I could learn so much more on and learn about more about myself. And when I did do that, I found I got a way more consistent enjoyment of my sport and more consistent enjoyment of life outside of sport. And my performance on the field, I felt, became more consistent, more mature.
Okay.
But that took, I suppose, 5 or 6 years of very deep and hard work on myself to, so it's first accept that I get anxious and stressed in those situations, which is very normal. And then, working on things on a consistent basis, both on a daily basis around my own outlook on these things and how we can best manage them, and using different tools like visualization and imagery and self-talk, and mindfulness and meditation to bring myself back to the present and not be overly concerned about the game in 7 days' time or the exam, or, will I won't get clients, or whatever it is. And I think these are skills now that even more players have to dial up and use, because, it is a lot of uncertainty and confusion there at the moment. And we probably won't know for a number of months what's going to play out. But, by anchoring ourselves in the present moment and what we can control, we're going to reduce the level of anxiety and fear and worries we do have.
Tony, can I ask you what it was like working with Galway? And obviously they reached an All Ireland final last year and had an exceptional year under Tim Rabbit, and Stephen was still involved in the back room. Obviously, a guy you know very well. What was it like working with that group of players? Very, very motivated and driven bunch.
Yeah, it was great. It was Stephen's first year I went in with the girls, and it was a big challenge for Stephen taking over the group because they're a bit of an unrest the couple of years leading into it. So we just tried to really put a really strong management team and structure in around the girls to give them every possible opportunity to reach their potential as athletes, both on and off the field. And my experiences working with the girls that year was unbelievable honesty and trust within every meeting we had, and such engagement and buy-in and what we're trying to achieve. And reaching Connacht finals that year and All Ireland semi-finals, it was great to see from such a low ebb the year previously, to see with the hard work and the vision and direction that Stephen, the players and management bought into, and the backroom team, that it is really achievable when you get everyone on the one bus going in the one direction and really committed to what they want to achieve. And it was thoroughly enjoyable working with the girls, and it was thoroughly enjoyable, I suppose, hearing the honesty within the group of what they wanted to achieve and how they wanted to go about it. And I think it was one of my most enjoyable years working in any team sport that year, and seeing the progress that we made from the year previously.
Excellent. Tony, you mentioned something earlier on in the conversation there a couple of minutes ago about it was a long-term approach with you. It just didn't happen overnight, and you hear, and I've experienced this on one or two occasions. People, will you come in and have a chat with this lot? They think there's a quick fix. There's no quick fix here. This is a long-term. If you're going to engage with sports psychology, it's a long-term process, and you've got to train your mind just as you would your body.
Yeah, like if you look at an Olympic cycle, it's 4 years, and most S&C coaches would develop a 4-year plan around that, and a 1-year plan, and a 6-month plan, and a 1-month plan. And sports psychology for me is that, when we look at ourselves as a 16-year-old, mentally and emotionally we might be very underdeveloped, but physically, I was 6'2" or 6'3", so physically I looked well developed for my age. But tactically, had I appreciation of the game at that time either? Not really, compared to a senior intercounty player. So they all take stages to develop, and we have to be patient. Some people's mental capacity and emotional capacity is really, really strong when they're 17 or 18, based on their background and their experiences and where they were brought up. Some people pick it up really quickly and know how to handle these moments and handle these situations. Others, it just takes time, and that's physical, mental, emotional development. We're all at different stages, and we're all at different stages of our journey, and it's about putting those building blocks in place to allow people to first be educated on why it's beneficial, then look at how they can use it both in their daily lives, in the moment, and over the course of their careers. And then how do I integrate it into my life? It has to be individualized. I can't be using Tony Óg's thought process, or whoever it is, Cora Staunton's thought process. We're all very individual in how we see the world, and how we view our experiences. And it's about learning through those moments and coming out of them stronger, and seeing them as a moment of growth, really. And this time we're having right now, Jackie, I think is a great moment of growth for everyone, because the distractions that we always had in society, be it the business of work or the business of our sports careers, have maybe dialed down a bit now, and we can really look at the achievement of life so far, what progress we've made, maybe what we really want to achieve in our sport and outside of our sport, and how we're going to get after that once this cycle is over.
Absolutely. Tony, Jurgen Klopp is the manager of Liverpool, as you well know. And when he took over, he spoke about turning doubters into believers, and he was talking about the support base at the time. There are skeptics, obviously, when it comes to sports psychology. Have you encountered those? I'm sure on many occasions. Is there some that just it's not for them, or are there some doubters that you can turn into believers as well?
I think there's skeptics. There was big skeptics to strength and conditioning maybe 10 years ago, and now there's
Correct.
massive buy into it. So maybe sports psychology, we haven't told the story of how it can benefit. Maybe we haven't produced enough research in the right areas to show how it can benefit. Um, I think I try to use the experience of the group and people who have used it before, and have found the benefits of it. I've tried to show, I suppose, individual athlete case studies and team athlete case studies where they view elements of sports psychology to get the best of themselves. I think we're all watching Michael Jordan at the moment and amazed at his mindset. And one big piece I took from him last night was his biggest ability and his biggest trait that he was better at than every other athlete was his ability to stay in the present moment.
Mm.
Now, for me, that's where we all need to get to in daily life, because if I'm thinking into the future, I'm probably creating anxiety and worry around what if, what then, what must, what can I do? And if I'm thinking about something in the past, I'm regretting something or something I didn't do. So he had that ability when reporters are walking into a dressing room with him and asking him, going, Michael, are you going to win tonight? Are you going to play well tonight? And all he answered was yes, no, or maybe. So he wasn't attached to the outcome of the game or how well he was going to play. He was just enjoying the moment. And you could see that in the team meetings. You could see that in his practice. He was just enjoying the fun of shooting practice shots from impossible angles with his teammates. And there was no worry about the NBA final or his perception of his legacy or the outcome of what was going to happen. And, you know, that's another trainable skill I think is so important in athletes to let go of, you know, the attachment to winning and failure and losing, and just really get into the moment of expressing yourself in your career, expressing yourself in the moment in your family, expressing yourself in a training session you do today, in meetings you're having in work, and be totally present and absorbed in that. And there's golden in every interaction we have every day. We're having a conversation now. I feel this is a golden moment. This might be the only moment we have today. You know, there's golden in seeing your family and friends a bit more regular and more often. You know, there's golden being out in nature a bit more regular and more often, and not hearing traffic and noise and air pollution. So it's to, I suppose, open up the senses to the magic in the present moment that's available to us all here and now, right now, and been available for them experiences, and not allowing our mind to wander to the future or the past.
Yeah, that's good advice. So we have there's a lake out here in front of where we're living, and there's 4 new cygnets have been hatched over the last few days, and it's stuff you wouldn't really normally, you know, touch base with, but it's just lovely to see, as you say, that connection with nature that I think a lot of people are getting back to as well. It's a really nice thing. Um, Tony, in terms of our players, many of them who will be looking in and looking for some key tips and advice, and many of whom I'm sure are feeling that uncertainty, their normal way of life in terms of their identity as an athlete, and that link with the group environment is not there for them at the moment. And I'm sure I can more or less categorically state that some of them will be struggling with that, without that connection to team, and to their teammates as well, and to their sport. Of course, they can do their challenges and their bits and bobs at home, but it's not the same as that team environment. And Tony, what would be what have you, without obviously going into individual cases, what have you heard anecdotally that players are most struggling with at this point in time?
Yeah, when I think of it, there's a bit of grief to this cycle that we're in at the moment, Jackie, you know, and we as sports people are very inclined to attach ourselves to our sports identity. Now, roles in life are going to come and go, so we're all going to have different roles in life. You know, we were the minor, the underage player at some stage, we were the senior player at some stage, and that'll move on to a position where you might be a coach or manager. You're also a brother or sister or a wife or a partner in life at the moment. You're a relative. So, you know, it's not getting over attached to any of these roles in life is really important. And for sports people, you know, if you think of this cycle at the moment, Jackie, we kind of run into a cycle where there's a bit of denial at the start to what's happening, and confusion. And, you know, that's probably coming every 3 or 4 weeks for people, because it's been pushed out again, maybe to September, October. And, you know, you're going to go through that cycle maybe at different moments each day. And then we maybe move into a place where there's a bit of anger and frustration over this. Why can't they tell us more? Why are certain sports going back and we're not going back? Why can't they just give us a date? And then we might move to a sense of, you know, what's my meaning of all this? You know, what's my meaning in life? You know, what do I bring to this situation? And then we might move to a place where there's acceptance, and it's say, right, this is what's happening. You know, here's solutions that I can bring to it. Here's what's in my control. And I start to look at, you know, the people in my environment that can support me, the things I can do outside of sport at the moment that can maybe give me a sense of achievement and fulfillment. And, you know, we are not our sport. We just play and experience sport. So for every athlete listening today, you know, you as a person are so much more than your sport. You know, there's an honesty, there's a loyalty, there's a kindness, there's an integrity about you that people warm to and like about you, regardless if you're playing sport or not. And it's to understand who you are, not what you do or what you play. And, you know, if you ask any of your family around you why they're friends with your people closest to you, you know, it's not because you got 1-1 in a match last year or because you have 3 trophies sitting in the cabinet. You know, it's how you treat them and it's how you make them feel. And that's something that's available to all of us each and every day in our work environments, our family environments, and our relationships. So this time is probably giving us more time to actually, you know, who am I and what do I want to demonstrate in the world that's important to me? And looking at our values and behaviors and really dialing into them and leaning into them. And, you know, when we dial and lean into them, we find we're more meaningful and more engaged in our work. We've more purpose in our work. We've more purpose in our interactions and our daily lives. We find that sense of flow. So, you know, on a sports field, when you're challenged at a certain level and you have to use a certain level of your skills above normal capacity, you would get into a flow state. Well, we can also find that in our work context, or we can also find it in trying new skills. So dialing into art, dialing into music, learning an instrument, you know, learning how to cook maybe. These are all things that can get us into a flow state. So just find things maybe that you've neglected that you loved when you were a child, but gave you a sense of challenge and you had to use a certain level of skill that's above your current level. And, you know, that flow or sense of achievement, you know, I talk to athletes regularly and they say, geez, where am I going to get that again? I've never had it only in sport. That's because maybe your only experiences were in sport, but when you put yourself into, you know, speaking on stage, when you put yourself into acting on stage, when you put yourself learning a new instrument in a musical group for the first time, that'll give you that level of challenge and level of skill that maybe you didn't know you had or you had to draw on. And there's great sense of fulfillment and achievement in those things. So it's finding other avenues now, Jackie, at the moment that, you know, this thing may go on for 3 or 4 months. I don't know, there's uncertainty around that. Whereas other areas, maybe I could challenge myself both in my sport, in a training context, pushing myself to new limits in the gym, or around running, around skills challenges, but also learning new skills. You know, art, music, drawing, cooking, you know, gardening, you know, software development, whatever it is you're passionate about, maybe you've put in the long finger for a while, go and challenge yourself to learn a new skill in that and just see, you know, how absorbed and engaged you can come into something like that. And that's an important point to make around this time, that, you know, sometimes we think the only place I get that level of challenge and competition is in my sports domain. But, you know, from all the research I've read, work environment can be the most beneficial place for doing that. And, you know, learning new instruments or new skills as well is a great way of challenging ourselves. So trying to think of other perspectives of how we might do that is so important this time.
Yeah, solid advice, Tony. And by doing all those things, you help to quiet the mind as well. In many respects, it's therapeutic in many instances, especially the gardening and the cooking and that. Um, Tony, but in terms of, you mentioned mindfulness and meditation as well. How often do you
Mm.
practice that? And if you were to give somebody some tips on who've maybe never done it before, what's the best way of getting started?
Yeah, I think I probably about 6 or 7 years at it myself, Jackie, and I probably felt the need for it when I was playing myself. That the week of a big game, again, my mind would wander off to, you know, eventualities and outcomes of Sunday and playing well or not playing well. And it's to try and train the skill of coming back into the present moment. And mindfulness is a great way of detaching from those thoughts and making us aware of the helpful, unhelpful, and maybe neutral thoughts we're having in a day. You know, there's great science and research around as well that when we practice the skill of mindfulness from a physical point of view, we lower heart rate, we lower blood pressure, and we got into a thing called the relaxation response. So during a lot of the year, athletes are constantly in maybe a state of adrenaline and stress response through physical activity, through their workload in college or in work. Now might be a great time to actually retrain those patterns we've been conditioned to and get into a more relaxation response. So meditation will train our attention and focus to be on one breath at a time, one moment at a time, a lower heart rate, lower blood pressure. It's also been shown to produce a hormone called serotonin, which is a happiness hormone which relaxes both in mind and body. And these are all great skills that we can dial into when we're maybe running away with thoughts of the future or thoughts of the past, and just anchoring ourselves in that present moment. And when we come back to our sport then, and we've really worked on, anchoring ourselves in the present moment, a mistake on the field will have less impact on us because we'll just reset and come back to the present moment. They find actually with mindfulness, when they practice for 10 or 15 minutes every day, that our ability to go back into that state at numerous stages throughout the day and experience it comes a lot more repetitive because we've fired the neural pathways in our brain to feel that experience and be that experience more regular. So it's a massive field, and I think it's only beginning to really grow and see the emphasis on it, and all the research papers are starting to come through on the benefits of it. And you think of it, when I talk there maybe around emotions we're having around anger and frustration and whatever else, an 8-week mindfulness course for people with severe depression has been shown to really reduce symptoms in a massive way, where people, along with physical activity, nearly reduce symptoms completely or to a very low level. So, not all our players are going to be in that emotional state of depression, but, if we're finding ourselves, we're very irritable and anxious and in a low mood at the moment, first off, meditation will help us to anchor ourselves in the present moment. It also helps us to detach from those thoughts and become more aware of the thinking, the feeling that we're having around the situations that we're in, or the people or the situations that trigger those emotions. And when you kind of come to that self-awareness of, this is what causes, this is what I'm thinking, now, is this thought helpful or is it unhelpful? Is it 100% true? Can I challenge it and challenge that lazy brain that we all have around certain situations? Then I can affect the change that I want to do around it. And, I find journaling and meditating are a great way to grow our awareness around, negative thinking cycles and patterns that we can all get into around certain situations in life or certain, events that happen. And the great thing is, Jackie, from all my research on happiness, 10% of it is down to life circumstance. So the life circumstance we're in at the moment and the challenge we're in around COVID-19 is only a 10% burden on how we're thinking and feeling. If we look at things from an optimistic perspective of, what can I do, what can I control, what can I influence, what are the benefits coming out of this, well then those thoughts and the actions that they lead to will increase my happiness fourfold. And we have that power both internally and externally to create that for ourselves. It's just been, dialing down the noise in our head through meditation and really listening into what that inner voice is maybe telling us at particular times in the day that is causing that disruption and distress for us. And very often it starts with a thought, and if we can really look at, that faulty thought that we're having around the current situation, and we challenge it and say, is it true? And more than likely, a lot of the time it isn't. And we look at new ways of thinking of it and we give ourselves a fresh perspective on it, well then that can really just cut that in two straight away, that faulty belief or thought we had around it.
It's fascinating, Tony. And even listening to you talk just relaxes me. You've got this lovely lilt to your voice as well, I have to say. Tony, there's so much more I wanted to, we could get into. There's, the specifics of imagery and visualization and positive self-talk and even body language and how that impacts on the whole field. It's something I would like to catch up with you again on, Tony, perhaps as we near more of a return to play. But for now, Tony, if somebody wants to get in touch with you or find out more about what you do, what's the best way of them to do that?
Yeah, Jackie, I suppose I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter and Instagram under Tony Óg Regan. And if anyone's contacting me directly, they can get me at tonyog.regan@gmail.com. And
Perfect.
I'd be happy to answer any queries or issues that are arising for people and players in this moment. And I think it is a challenge first, but sports people have had difficult challenges both on and off the field over the course of their lives, and it's about understanding that you have the resources within you to handle this situation and come out of it even stronger than you thought was possible. And I think it should give us all a real appreciation of what's important in our lives now, and realizing that sport is one facet of it, and there's a whole other range of things that makes up who we are and what we're about. And getting to the core of that is so important during this time.
Great message, Tony, and great talking to you today. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Jackie. Talk to you soon.